Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll let folks get settled into the Zoom room and we will be starting momentarily. All right, welcome. We have lots of you joining us, so let's get started today. Thank you for joining us for our engaging difficult to reach adolescents into substance use disorder treatment with your presenter, Mark Sanders. The views expressed in this training are the views of the speaker and do not reflect the official position of DHHS or SAMHSA. If you are having any housekeeping or technical issues, please individually message me, Alyssa Koala, and I would be happy to assist you. Any questions for the speaker, please use the Q&A section of your toolbar. The speaker will respond to questions as time allows. If captions or the live transcript would be helpful, please locate that option using your Zoom toolbar. At the end of today's presentation, you will be redirected to a very short survey, and we would greatly appreciate it if you could fill that out. Certificates of attendance will be sent out via email to all who attended today's session in full. If you would like to stay connected with the Great Lakes ATTC, follow us on Facebook, check out our LinkedIn, our YouTube channel, or our Spotify channel. I'm super excited to hand this over to your presenter, Mark Sanders.
And thank you, Alyssa, and good morning, everyone. How many of you, by show of hands, are familiar with a baseball player named Lou Gehrig? Would you raise your hand if you've ever heard of Lou Gehrig? Lou Gehrig played baseball 100 years ago, and he was teammates with a man by the name of Babe Ruth. In the 1940s, they made a movie about Lou Gehrig's life called The Pride of the Yankees. And towards the end of the movie, he went in front of 40,000 screaming Yankee fans and gave the following speech. Today, and that was an echo in the stadium, today, I feel like the luckiest man on the face of this earth. Today, I feel like the luckiest man on the face of this earth. How could he be lucky? He was dying. Lou Gehrig was dying of a condition which they later named after him, ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. So I went on the internet, looked up the backstory. The story that I read was that the day before Lou Gehrig gave that speech, there was a 12-year-old boy in the hospital. The boy was sick, he was dying, and he refused to take his medication. And doctors told his mother, if your son doesn't take his medication, he'll be dead soon. The mother knew that Lou Gehrig was her son's hero. So she called the Yankee organization and asked if Lou Gehrig could come to the hospital to convince her son to take his medication. And he showed up, and the boy's eyes got so big, he saw his hero, and he said, I'm still not going to take my medication unless you hit a home run tomorrow. And Lou Gehrig said, okay, I'll hit a home run tomorrow. He didn't hit a home run. He hit two. Now fast forward. Right before he gave the speech, the mother called the Yankee organization, right, and told Lou Gehrig that her son started taking his medication. He felt lucky because he was able to help someone. And you're very fortunate because every day you wake up, you help somebody. Someone's life condition is made better every day because you wake up. In fact, when I think of your work, I'm reminded of a quote from Muhammad Ali, the great boxer. Ali said that service to others is the rent that you pay for your room here on earth. Service to others is the rent that you pay for your room here on earth. And based upon the fact that you help others for a living, know that I know that your rent has been paid in full. In fact, would you find your emojis and release your favorite emoji for those who are with us today who dedicate their life to helping others? Take a moment, if you would, and just find your emojis. And would you release one of them for your colleagues with us today? And I say welcome. Mark Sanders is my name. 44 years. I've been a certified substance use disorders counselor. In 38 years, within those 44, I've worked with adolescents. And people ask me, how have I dedicated 44 years of my life to this work? And the answer is I collect stories, recovery stories, which inspire me. So right before we get into our content, I have a story for you. This story is called The Flap of a Butterfly's Wings in Brazil and caused an earthquake in Texas. The flap of a butterfly's wings in Brazil can cause an earthquake in Texas. So here's the story. It was March of 1986. I was sitting in my office downtown Chicago. The phone rang. A man called me collect. He was in tears, right? And he said, I need to see a counselor today. I looked in the appointment book. I said, I can see you in an hour. He said it'll take 8 hours. He lived on 103rd Street South on the south side of the city of Chicago. My office was located downtown Chicago on Jackson and State Street. He walked 103 blocks to meet with me. He walked 103 blocks. Was he motivated? He told me he had gotten paid that Friday and spent his entire paycheck on drugs. So he called me collect at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning. He showed up exhausted. I did the assessment. I said, are you ready to get help for drugs? He said, I'm ready. I said, if you leave my office and go and stand on the corner of Jackson and State Street, a bus will appear. Take the bus to the end of the line. At the end of the line, there's a drug treatment center. He said, I don't have bus fare. And I was about to reach in my pocket to give him bus fare. And then one of my professor's voices came into my head. We're not about charity, about helping people help themselves. Give a man a fish he eats for a day. Teach a man a fish he eats for a lifetime. Who's ever heard that before? I talked to my supervisor. We gave him bus fare. He showed up a year to the day that I gave him that bus fare and gave it back and said he was grateful for his recovery. You know what I've learned in these 44 years? Is that when you help someone with their recovery, eventually gratitude sets in. And once they become grateful because you help them, they start helping others out of gratitude. And then the people they help start helping people out of gratitude. It basically means that your great work never ends. It really is true. That the flap of a butterfly's wings in Brazil can cause an earthquake in Texas. Every little bit you do is magnified. And Native Americans told me to share with you that what you do to help somebody with their recovery today will impact their family across 7 generations. So if they were there with you, a chief from one of the villages I talked to, he would say to you, thank you for helping the next 7 generations. Our presentation today is entitled Engaging Difficult to Reach Adolescents into Substance Use Disorders Treatment. Would you take a moment and find your chat feature and let us know what you do? Are you a butcher, a baker, a candlestick maker? What do you do? By the way, someone here is from New York and Puerto Rico and Holland. Alyssa, we've got a nice reach here. From right next door in Wisconsin to Holland and everything in between. We have psychologists, juvenile detention workers, and therapists, and psychologists, SUD professionals, nurse manager. We have a nice range. Social workers, some of my best friends are social workers. I never met a social worker I didn't like. We got prevention specialists. Thank you, Michelle and Dorothy. What do you do, Dorothy? Dorothy, evaluator. And Jennifer is with us. And we have another social worker, a lead prevention navigator. Very good. So with that in mind, let us begin. All right. So Alyssa went over the disclaimer. So before I share with you what these 44 years and research has taught me, we start with a question. What are techniques, strategies you have found effective in helping to engage adolescents into substance use disorders counseling? Let us chat one more time. What have you found to be effective? Oh, Katie says the use of motivational interviewing. We're going to talk about why. And Brian says establishing a strong connection. Yes. The research would suggest that motivational interviewing helps us to establish a strong connection. A few of you are saying, Assad said, doing our work from our heart, honesty, having a sense of humor, being trustworthy. You know, you all could teach this course right now. Avoiding power struggles, listening with compassion. Jennifer says, meeting them where they're at. Very good. So I'd like to add to your list. But first, we're going to take a moment to talk about the reasons adolescents resist SUD, substance use disorders, and mental health counseling. The stigma of mental illness and the stigma of substance use disorders. Point number 2, misdiagnosis, overdiagnosis, and treating clients as if they are their diagnosis. So let us start with first explaining to you the reason that I'm including mental illness in our presentation. Because the research indicates that mental illness and substance use disorders overlap at the rate of 50 to 70%. In fact, Dr. Ken Minkoff from Harvard said that it's so common for individuals that have one of the two disorders to have both. It is the expectation until the clients prove otherwise. Are you all sitting down? Okay, good. Did you know that people who make diagnoses, licensed clinical counselors, marriage and family counselors, licensed clinical social workers, psychologists, psychiatrists, that people who make diagnoses, according to researcher Scott Miller, that we only agree upon diagnosis 30% of the time. If your niece broke her wrist and 100 doctors looked at an x-ray, how many out of 100 doctors would conclude looking at the x-ray that your niece's wrist is broke? Would you put your response in chat? 100 doctors looked at the x-ray after your niece broke her wrist. How many out of 100 would conclude, yes, that is a broken wrist? The answer is just about all of them. But yet when it comes to mental illness, we agree 30% of the time. Oh, by the way, that one thing I believe in 2026, for those adolescents and adults that we work with that have a co-occurring disorder, that most of the time, the mental illness comes first. And that the symptoms often appear in adolescence and childhood, but they're so subtle that the family doesn't catch it. The school doesn't catch it. The school counselor doesn't catch it. But before you know it, that young person is medicating the mental illness with the use of alcohol and other drugs. There's often an 8 to 10-year gap between when psychiatric symptoms first appear and when the family reaches out for help. We agree 30% of the time. And guess what? If the diagnosis is wrong, then the treatment plan is wrong, and the medication is wrong. My mentor was diagnosed with cancer, and he wrote an article on the subject of what mental health professionals can learn from cancer doctors about making a diagnosis. He said when he was diagnosed with cancer, the first thing his doctor asked him to do was to go get a second opinion. Let us chat. When was the last time someone was diagnosed with a mental illness or a substance use disorder? And the counselor said, let's go get a second opinion. Put your response in chat, I'll wait. And Tony said, never. And guess what, Tony? If the diagnosis is wrong, then the treatment plan is wrong and the medication is wrong. There was a 16-year-old teenager, and I was assigned to be her therapist. And she said to me, I don't like therapists. I don't like therapy. I said, how come? She said, I've been in therapy since I was 6 years old, 10 years in therapy. I said to her, that's a lot of therapy. But I heard you're a really good artist and a really good poet and that you write really well. I tell you what, if you tell me your story, then I can advocate for you to do poetry writing as opposed to therapy. That 10 years of therapy is a lot of therapy. Here's her story. She says, ever since I was really young, I learned that I didn't do a good job of bonding with a peer group. So I spent a lot of time alone, and I started using drugs at an early age because I couldn't bond with a peer group. I said, when did you first discover that? She said, in preschool. I asked her, what was happening in preschool? She says, I was reading. And what were your classmates doing? They were learning their alphabets. And what about in kindergarten? I was reading big books. And what were your classmates doing? They were learning to read children's books, looking at pictures. And I said to her, it sounds like the problem wasn't that you couldn't bond with a peer group. You didn't have a peer group. You were reading when they were learning the alphabets. She called her mother and said, Mom, finally, a therapist that understands my giftedness. I can work with him. Let me tell you what it took me to understand her giftedness. How many of you, by show of hands, have kids? You know, our kids are always saying, Mom, I'm smarter than you. Dad, I'm smarter than you. I have a son who's smarter than me. And I knew he was smarter than me when he was 3 years old. He said to me, Dad, I don't like your job. You're on the road all the time, giving those speeches. I don't like your job. When you come home from giving those speeches on the road, I want to know your every thought while you're on the road. I said, son, my every thought. I have the greatest number of thoughts in the history of thoughts. I have millions of thoughts when I'm on the road. My son said to me, millions? That's not the biggest number. I said, son, what's bigger than millions? He said, a Google. I said, what? He said a Google. I said, what's a Google? He said a Google is a one with 100 zeros behind it. I never heard of such a thing. Then I asked him, the company Google, did they name their company after that number? He said, yes, I knew. He was smarter than me. You see, my son learned to read when he was 3 years old. So he'd go to preschool and he'd sit in the windowsill reading a book while his classmates were learning A, B, C, D. He wouldn't hold eye contact with them. He'd look out the window, he'd read. So they brought in evaluators and they gave my son a diagnosis. Let us check. What was the diagnosis they gave him? Wasn't interacting, he was looking out the window, no eye contact. What was the diagnosis? Do you all realize, do you all realize that in less than 4 seconds, you came up with a diagnosis? Some of you all said ADD, ADHD, the spectrum. In many ways, insurances, our companies are forcing us to do that. Come up with a diagnosis immediately. Guess what? If the diagnosis is wrong, then the treatment plan is wrong and the medication is wrong. You know, I found out that sometimes when adolescents cheat their medication, their psychiatric medication, and they throw it out, they're not always in denial. Sometimes they know they don't have the condition. It's not the right medicine for the condition. So now they're smoking marijuana and taking pills. They're medicating themselves. So, my clinical recommendation, since we misdiagnose so much, my clinical recommendation is that number one, clients should stay in continuous assessment throughout the course of us working with them, because sometimes things clear up, sometimes we have a different diagnostic picture. And I believe, even though AI will never replace you, until we start getting second opinions from each other, I think AI might be the tool that we might use to get a second opinion. Not that that's the main opinion, yours is, but we need secondary opinions because there's a lots of misdiagnosis, overdiagnosis. That 16-year-old girl that I work with who received therapy from age 6 to age 16, I looked at her previous records. She had 20 different diagnoses. That's a lot of different diagnoses. And then treating the client as if they are their diagnosis. I'm so grateful for Nanette Larson. Nanette Larson has a public story of bipolar disorder, and she has a master's degree in psychology, and she is one of the highest ranking individuals in my state in terms of providing mental health services. And one day, she met with a group of people diagnosed with schizophrenia, a group of adolescents diagnosed with schizophrenia, and Nanette Larson taught me first person language. She said, stop telling the world you're schizophrenic. You're not schizophrenic. You have schizophrenia. So that'd be like somebody who has herpes, gonorrhea, syphilis, and chlamydia, saying that they are herpes, gonorrhea, syphilis, and chlamydia. There's more to you than that. I'm going to tell you a quick story. I'm singing to the choir right now about my hero. When we were sophomores in high school, he was a senior. He was an all-city baseball, basketball, football player. In other words, he was one of the three greatest athletes in three sports in the city of Chicago. And he dated the prettiest girl in the world. And more important than that, he had a perfectly round afro like Michael Jackson, and it was beige. We felt like the Lord cheated all the other young men in the neighborhood, gave it all to him. When he was a senior in high school, he tore his ACL. He had a bad knee injury, and he couldn't play sports in college. He was grieving. And so he started drinking heavily and smoking crack cocaine and using heroin for the next 3 decades. Started in adolescence. And so 7 times a year, I go down the old block to pay homage to our hero. And if you saw him, He would say, he looks like he may be homeless. Every time I see him, he'd say to me, hey, cousin, you have a few dollars? It's my birthday. Nobody has 7 birthdays a year. And one day I drove down the old block. He said, hey, cousin, and before he could finish the sentence, Earl and Tony, we talk a lot, and we talk about you. And you were our hero then, and you still are. With tears in his eyes, he said, thanks, Mark. So a few years ago, I gave a speech in a substance use disorders treatment facility, and he was there as a client. And he ran over and gave me a hug. And later the counselor said to me, do you know that they were using language we don't use anymore? Do you know that manipulative dope fiend? I said, he's more than that. He's our hero. Native Americans told me, if you want to love something, call it a flower. If you want to destroy it, call it a weed. Language is important. Oh, by the way, quick update. When they diagnosed my son as having autism, we took him to have a second opinion with a specialist in working with children that are gifted. The therapist did his evaluation and said he doesn't have autism. He's bored. My son at 4 knew he wanted to be a physicist. Notice how fast I had to say the word. I can barely pronounce. He knew at 4 he wanted to be a physicist. Went to a major university and studied physics. And then he asked him, what were you thinking when you looked out the window? He had visited my old neighborhood where my hero lived, where there was all that poverty. And he thought that if kids could get interested in science, he was 4 years old when he thought this. If kids could get interested in science, that could pull them out of poverty. He was building a science museum, an interactive science museum for children in his imagination. Counseling is often not their idea. Here's another reason why they resist. Usually some adults say you need to go to counseling. They may view counseling as strange. It's a different kind of relationship. We ask them questions, they ask us few questions, right? They disclose, we don't disclose. We listen, they do most of the talking. And sometimes if we have them sign a release of information, we can receive 1,000 papers worth of documentation on them. They know nothing about us. They were harmed in previous counseling or it was unhelpful. Did you know that research says that 10% of the clients that we work with in mental health and SUD treatment will get worse as a result of us working with them? I know it's true for me because for years I worked with adolescents in outpatient settings, and approximately 10% of them needed inpatient treatment while working with me in outpatient treatment. They got worse. Too many previous counselors. Adolescents one time said to me, why should I tell you my story? I've had 4 therapists this year. I'm tired of retelling my story. In other words, that agency has such rapid turnover. They have to tell the story over and over again to a new therapist. They believe it will be a waste of time. You ever had an adolescent walk in your office and look at the watch that they're not wearing and say, when is this over? Believing it'll be a waste of time. And it took me 40 years to figure this out. Actually, not that long, maybe 35 years. Lots of adolescents are resistant to counseling because they review the presenting problem as a solution to their problems. If I can just give you just a couple examples. There was a young woman I worked with that was diagnosed with anorexia. When she was a girl growing up, her father had chronic alcohol use disorder. He drank alcohol so heavy, you would need a DSM-5 to make the diagnosis. You could smell alcohol coming out of her father's pores. He was always losing jobs, and they would have to relocate. Sometimes they would lose their home when he lost his job. So she was constantly moving as a girl growing up. And when her father wasn't getting fired, losing jobs and relocating, he would go into her room when she was a girl growing up, and he would sexually assault his daughter. She told me that she felt like the only control she had in her life were the calories she put in her body. So she viewed her anorexia as a solution to her problem because it gave her a sense of control. I had a client I worked with who self-harming did cutting. She said to me, they don't understand. I'm not suicidal. I'm numb. I'm depressed. She said, the only time I feel anything is when I cut. She saw cutting as a solution to her problem. I had a client that was gang affiliated, and his father would get intoxicated and would physically beat he and his mother. He thought that maybe the father may kill him or his mother. And he joined the gang and told the gang what the father was doing to he and the mother. And the gang attacked the father and told him that he would never hit either one of them again. And he never hit either one of them again. So my client saw his gang affiliation as a solution. He felt like being in a gang was saving his life and saving the life of his mother. All right. Took me years to figure this out. It's natural for adolescents or adults to resist any effort to get them to stop using drugs, because from an adolescent mindset, and many adults, drugs work. Now, eventually they turn on you. I don't want you to say, oh, I went to hear him speak and he said drugs work. Eventually they turn on you. But for a while, they work. And they turn on you. They numb emotional pain. I had an adolescent client I worked with. Boy, did he love his father. If every young man had a relationship with their father, like this young man, a dramatically better place to be. Father would take him fishing, to play baseball, basketball, football. He loved being with his father. And one day he rushed home at 3 o'clock from school and opened the door, and his father was hanging from the ceiling. His father died by suicide. He said the only thing that helped him deal with his grief was when he got high. And I believed him. He said getting high took away some of the pain of the grief. They summer rage. I work with a lot of teenagers who suffer from father hunger. And father hunger occurs when the adolescent grew up and didn't get enough fathering. Number of years ago, I was in London, England, and there were these women standing outside late at night. They were selling roses, flowers. And our tour guide said, oh, those young women, they're Eurasians. Their fathers were from Europe, and their fathers got their mothers pregnant during the Vietnam War in Vietnam. And here they were, 30, 40 years later, looking for the man that they'd never met. Father hunger. I do lots of work with teenage males on probation who suffer from father hunger. Incredible story about this boy who played Park District football. And he was a fifth-string running back on the football team. What are the chances you're ever going to get in a football game as a fifth-string running back on the football team? I'm glad you asked. If you're a fifth-string running back on the football team, you'd have an easier time finding a penny in the Sahara Desert than ever getting in a football game. If you're a fifth-string running back on the football team, you'd be more likely to be struck by lightning 5 times in the same day and live. Your whole job as a fifth-string running back on the football team is to watch grass grow on the football field. The boy's father died, and on a Friday they held a funeral. And he walked in the locker room the following Saturday morning and said, Coach, I want to play the whole game. And the coach did what you didn't let him play the whole game. His father died. The boy scored 5 touchdowns. The great Walter Payton, the great running back, never scored 5 touchdowns in a football game. And coach said, look, you're a fifth-string running back. He said, Coach, when my dad was alive, he was legally blind. So I figured that since he died and went to heaven, he could see me. I wanted him to be proud of me. I just talked to young men between the ages of 5 to 10 years old. They didn't have contact with their fathers. Mr. Sanders, can you find my father? Please find him, please. Age 11, have you found him yet? Please find him, please. Age 12, I think about him all the time. Age 13, I never think of him. Age 14, I wished he was dead. And you see what happened? Is that idealistic yearning turned into rage. And the young men that I work with are medicating that rage with the use of alcohol and other drugs. They see that as a solution to their rage. Of course, eventually the drugs turn on them. They medicate psychiatric symptoms. Let me ask you a question. Yes or no in chat. Have you ever been prescribed a medicine by a doctor where the side effects were greater than the benefits? You know, for years, when I work with clients that have mental illness, they would tell me things like, it makes them impotent. It makes them more depressed, right? It takes away their appetite. It increases their appetite. It causes them constipation. And we would write that they were in denial. And then I reached an age where doctors prescribed me medication that where the side effects were worse than the benefits, and I got it. We had a client, young client we worked with, teenager. They said that she was on par to be a supermodel until bipolar disorder set in. The medication, one of the side effects is that it made her thirsty, so she was drinking lots of liquor and gained 25 pounds. Then it made her walk like she was stiff taking the medication. She threw away the medication, started snorting cocaine, and lost her weight. She saw cocaine as a solution to her problems. And then drugs provide relief from moral injury. I first became aware of moral injury with war veterans. Sometimes coming back from battle, war veterans create heinous crimes that they wouldn't ordinarily create in battle. Then I realized lots of the clients we work with substance use disorders also suffer from moral injury. Like the young man I work with who started serving at age 11. Some of you are wondering, what restaurant? No, he started serving crack cocaine. His mother had a felony arrest, and she had a hard time getting a job. He started selling cocaine to finance the family, but he had a moral dilemma. Two of the women that he sold crack cocaine to were pregnant. And one of the women who he sold crack cocaine to was his best friend's grandmother. He felt so much moral shame that he wound up using all of his drugs himself and didn't make any profit selling anything, just when you think you heard it all. I heard a young client say to me, said, Mark, I'm so happy I don't use drugs anymore because now I don't have to sleep with any more pit bulls. She didn't have a job, and she would ask the drug dealer to give her drugs on credit, and the drug dealer said, if you have sex with my dog. She went to a women's group and told her story, and some of the women gave her a hug and said, me too. I've been in that situation too. She's now in long-term recovery. But some people medicate moral injury with the use of alcohol and other drugs. They provide constant companionship. I used to work with wards of the state and asked them who was more predictable, who was more consistent, adults or drugs. They told me I could rely on drugs more than I can rely on people. My mom told me she was going to visit me. I haven't seen her in 2 years. My dad called and said we were going to go to a baseball game. He never showed up. But drugs. And then, of course, according to Dr. Gabor Mate, at the core of adolescent substance use disorders is often either childhood abandonment or childhood trauma. And they're medicating these conditions with the use of alcohol and other drugs. I just want to take a moment to ask you, is any of this making sense so far? Or does it seem like none of this is making sense? So far, Vicky says yes. Kendra says yes. Caroline, Natalie says yes. So far, so good. All right. Thank you all for that. Diane says yes. All right. All right. So I promised you that I would share this with you. Engagement doesn't begin when a client walks into your office. I'm going to talk with you about pre-treatment engagement strategies and then engaging adolescents in treatment the first 2 sessions. Why the first 2 sessions? Because research by Barry Duncan indicates that somewhere between 50 to 65% of adolescents will miss their second outpatient session. Somewhere between 50 to 65% of adolescents will miss their second session. So we only have a little bit of time to engage. So here are 4 pre-treatment engagement strategies. Work along with me. We learned the first one from doctor's offices. If you call the client the day before the first session This is the reason why your doctors send you a reminder. If you call the day before, send a text message before the first session, you increase first session attendance by 30%. You and I too also know that usually when we work with adolescents, we talk to the parents first. Here's what the research says. If you talk to parents by phone and you ask them to come in to help themselves, they're less likely to show. If you say come in to support your adolescent, they're more likely to show. After all, in their mind, the problem is him. It's my daughter. It's my son. And then as you build rapport, you can then stretch the unit of service from the adolescent to the entire family. And we've discovered that the tone of voice of the person that answers your phone can have an impact upon whether or not somebody makes the first session. Let me ask you a question, yes or no. Have you ever worked with a receptionist that had a real bad attitude? Yes or no? You ever worked with a receptionist with a bad attitude? And these are the individuals who are answering your phone. You know why? Because often the receptionist is the first person that everybody sees when they come in. They have the largest caseload. Everybody who calls, everybody who walks through the door is on the receptionist caseload. They are vulnerable to compassion fatigue, secondary trauma. They are the most vulnerable in the entire organization, number one. Number two, receptionists are often the lowest paid person in the entire agency. So they may be telling your client to have a seat, answering crisis calls while dodging bill collectors all at the same time. Why is this important? Because engagement doesn't begin with you. It begins with the person who answered that phone and the receptionist. As a matter of fact, Dr. Ken Minkoff from Harvard University went around the country doing webinars or live presentations on creating a welcoming environment. He didn't do those webinars with psychiatrists, psychologists, or social workers. He started with receptionists. Think about a mandated adolescent that doesn't want to be there, and then he meets a receptionist with a negative attitude. Voice tone matters. And then when the adolescent family shows up, a warm greeting matters as it pertains to engagement before they ever meet you. So let's talk about the first two sessions of counseling with adolescents, creating a welcoming environment. How do you create a welcoming environment? Let us chat. What do you do? Tony says a simple smile. That's it, Tony. How about others? Having things adolescent like. Someone said something to fidget with and a snack. By the way, I work with adolescent mandated. I have never seen an adolescent that's angry while eating a snack, ever. Try to have a warm voice tone. Fun colors. Let them know that there's a playful side to you. That makes a lot of sense. A welcoming voice, Dorothy says. Yes. Yes. So Christine says, you get the lead. What do you like to talk about? Look up from what you're doing. Yes, some of us are doing a little bit too much writing in the beginning, right? Look up. Let them know it's worthwhile. And I would like to add to your list. First two sessions. There is a program. Somebody else said something. There is a program. How about that, Michelle? We'll talk about that in a moment. I'm here to help you get off probation. We're on the same team. All right. There's a program in my town that did something that my mentor says that we all should do. In this era of budget cuts, he said, we have yet to tap into a group that might want to support what we do. Wealthy people in long-term recovery. So this one program in my town reached out to a millionaire in long-term recovery and said, can you help us? We need funding. This program, financed by a millionaire, won the NADAC 2020 Program of the Year. When you walk in to give a tour, the first thing you notice is the decor and an inviting waiting room. I should tell you, this program is located in the economically poorest part of the city of Chicago. You walk in that waiting room, and that's what you see. They intentionally had higher ceilings because they didn't want to feel like a hospital setting, right? Client told me that he was suicidal before he walked in there. And when he saw that chandelier made out of antelope horns, he started to believe that anything was possible. By the way, that's not real antelope horns. Every room in that facility is spectacular, right? Somebody mentioned colors. Adolescents told me they work like beginning at age 18. It makes them feel a sense of somebodyness. They have in that program music. And I asked the executive director, how do you know what music to play? His office is near the waiting room. And he says, I just listen to what clients sing along with and what they snap their fingers and stomp their foot to. And that's the music we play in the waiting room. Magazines and the pictures on the wall. That was a program that asked me to help them engage their clients more effectively in treatment. So I sat in the waiting room for 2 days because I wanted to view the agency from the perspective of new clients coming in. 80% of their clients were missing their second session. The national average is 50%. I sat there for 2 days. I started thumbing through the magazines in the waiting room as I was bored. In the waiting room, they had Good Housekeeping magazine, Oprah Winfrey magazine, Martha Stewart magazine. They work with Latino Hispanic gang members. I said, no wonder you have an 80%. Who are the magazines for? And then the pictures on the wall tell a story. Who's welcome, who's not welcome. Years ago, I worked at an agency, and we received a phone call from a man by the name of Marv Dyson, the CEO of WGCI radio station, 107.5 FM. And at the time, they had a Hall of Fame DJ named Tom Joyner. So Marv Dyson called us and said, we heard you all provide really good counseling. We're thinking of hiring your agency to work with our radio personalities. We need a tour first. And Marv Dyson got out the elevator and looked at the pictures on our wall, looked over at me and said, there are no pictures of African Americans on the wall, no pictures of women on the wall, no contract. He was gone like that. And that was 3 decades ago. And since that time, I've been asking myself the question, when clients come in, do they look at the pictures on their wall? Do they expect to see themselves? Do they see themselves? Since then, I've been thinking that the pictures on the wall should speak to the people that we serve. If I'm working with adolescents and every picture on my wall is somebody 90 years old, I might be missing an important small step that's an important step. Food. This program has its own garden in the back. All the fruits and vegetables in the garden are grown by the clients. Oh, and by the way, tell me if this is not as creative. Remember when I said a moment ago, the receptionist is often the lowest paid person at the agency with the biggest caseload? At this program, their receptionist has a master's degree in psychology. They're one of the highest paid people in the agency. They said, we want the first person that our clients meet to be somebody who knows how to engage them from the start. They give clients a tour. They use the drop-in center model, interesting program environments. So most programs that work with adolescents are perceived by teenagers as being bored. Individual therapy, group therapy, family therapy. We need to do those things. This program has added a lot more. There's their group schedule, art therapy group, music group, poetry writing group, right? Gardening. They have their own organic garden in the back group. Yoga, right? They have a group called Dealing with Procrastination, Anger Management. A lot of these groups are non-talk therapy because, as you and I know, lots of clients that we work with have histories of trauma, which lodges itself in the body. So sometimes verbal therapy doesn't get to it all. But they have a group every Thursday called the Soul Train, Old School Soul Train Dance Group. Movement helps them with their trauma. The first 2 sessions of therapy, joining small talk. So I studied a family therapy model in the 1980s called Structural Family Therapy by Salvador Minuchin out of New York. And there was one technique inside of structural family therapy called joining small talk, where the family comes in and you say, do you have any difficulty parking? How's the weather outside? Small talk before you get into the problem. And why is that important? Because Maya Angelou told Oprah Winfrey that only equals engage in small talk. When parents come in for us to meet with their teenager, they often feel like they failed, like we're up here with all these credentials and they're down here. But small talk levels the playing field. When teenagers come in to meet with us, one reason they're resistant is because they feel like they failed. But small talk levels the playing field. Only equals engage in small talk. So, when sessions begin, when I meet with parents, I might ask them questions about the work that they do, how they travel to get to the agency. If you weren't meeting with me on a Saturday morning, how would you be spending this time? How you met? And sometimes they bring with them their small children. And we often enjoying with the small children about their favorite toy, cartoons they like, the books they read, favorite subjects in school, favorite food, pizza, macaroni, and cheese. But it sends a powerful signal to the parents. Because if a parent has a substance use disorder or the adolescent, then all the attention is either brought to the adolescent or the parents, the adults. Who gets left behind? The smaller children, who might feel abandoned or neglected, increasing the chances that they too might have a problem with substance use. So I wanted to share with you my area of specialization in terms of working with adolescents. And I wish Mnuchin were alive because I would tell him that I don't just bond with these adolescents that are mandated for like a minute, like you put in strategic family therapy. I join with them until I think they're comfortable with me. So here we go. So I work with court-mandated adolescent males with substance use disorders. And most of them make a statement by what they're wearing. So we join around what I see. So shoes. What would you think? These young men are between ages like 14 to like 20 years old. What do you think are the most common shoes they're wearing coming in to meet with me? What are they wearing? What are they wearing? Somebody said J's, right? Nikes, tennis shoes. What kind of tennis shoes, Jennifer? They're either wearing some Jay-Z, some Jay-Z, some Kanye Wests, some Jordans. Young man came in to meet with me. He was wearing a 1960 version of Chuck Taylor Converse All-Stars Black. What I've learned is sometimes joining creates an affirmation. I said, young man, I wore those in high school. I can't believe it. You're wearing a pair of Chuck Taylor Converse low-top black all-stars. Most people that come in and meet with me are wearing the most recent Nikes or Jordans. I said, how are you able to do that? He said, I'm my own man. I don't have to follow other people. Then he looked me in the eye for the first time. Because once he affirmed himself, we were engaged. Jerseys. Most young men who I meet with on probation come in wearing a jersey, sometimes a current professional player, a retro Michael Jordan jersey, a LeBron James jersey, a Kobe Bryant jersey. Young man came in to meet with me, mandated by probation officer, wearing number 57. I said, young man, in all the years I've been a counselor, you're the first young man who ever came in wearing number 57. Most people come in wearing number 23 like Jordan, number 8 like Kobe. He said, I got it on sale at Kmart. I said, now I'm really impressed because I noticed there's no name on the back of your jersey. Are you the kind of young man that doesn't need another man's name on your back to feel okay about who you are? He says, I don't need anybody's name on my back. He affirmed himself. He looked me in the eye. Young man came in to meet with me wearing a New York Yankees cap. He lived like 3 blocks in Chicago away from where the Cubs live. We joined around his boldness. He said, yeah, they don't like me wearing this hat, but I get to wear what I want to wear. Names. When I meet with these young men and they have interesting names, before we talk about their drug use or drug selling, we always talk about their name. I ask them questions like, who named you? Of all the names they could have given you, how'd they choose that name? And do you think there was an intention on your life based upon the name that they gave you? Young man came in to meet with me. His name was Jabbar. His name was Jabbar. Who do you think he was named after? Who do you think he was named after? His name was Jabbar. Yeah, you're probably thinking what I thought. I thought he was named after that great basketball player, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So I asked him. I don't know, he said. I said, well, if you were, your name is interesting, right? Because he spells his name with two B's. Yours is spelled with one. Who named you? My father. Why? I don't know. I said, do you know what your name means? By the way, many adolescents feel like counseling is stupid. You're not that bright, the counselor. But if you can ask them a question that they don't know the answer to, and the answer is important to them, you can engage them. I had a young man who worked with me, told me he was in a street gang, and he gave me the name of the gang. I said, what's the history of the gang? He says, I don't know. I told him the history of his own gang. Now he's interested. He's leaning forward, right? So I told him his name meant giving giant. He stood up tall. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is 7'4". This young man was about 5'6". I said, your name has one B in it. Kareem has two. I wonder why. He said, I haven't seen my father in 3 years. I'm going to find him, and the next time we meet, I'll tell you about my name. We were guaranteed 2 sessions. Young man came in to meet with me. He was speaking to me in one-word paragraphs. You ever had a teenager speak to you in one-word paragraph? Everything you say, yes, no. Yes, no. They're trying to fire you before you can fire them. But I saw his tattoos. He had one right here, in between his thumb and his finger right here, that said, trust no one. He had a long tattoo down his arm, Tasmanian devil. I said, can you tell me about your tattoo? Trust no one. He said, I want to tell you the first time I went to therapy. My mother asked me to leave the room. And she got together with the psychiatrist to give me a psychiatric diagnosis so she could get a bigger check. I felt like a zombie taking that medication. Trust no one. And then he said, okay. He said, there's a girl who I was madly in love with. He said, I still madly in love with her. I dream about her. And she got pregnant by my best friend. I put my pen down. I said, man, that's horrible. I said, many of us have stories of like being betrayed by someone we love, but man, your girlfriend and your best friend. That's horrible. And he must have appreciated my empathy because then he continued to talk fully. Music. Every young man I work with on probation comes and listens to music. And I always ask them, what are they listening to? Young man came in, African-American man, said he was listening to Willie Nelson. I said, why Willie Nelson? He said, because he smokes weed with Snoop Dogg. I said, oh, okay. What else you listen to? Reinhard Reingold. I said, oh my God. He's classical. What's the story? We bonded around music and aspirations for the future. Again, I joined, so I know we're in rapport. I reached the point where I didn't feel like I had the right to ask anybody anything deeply personal unless I knew we were in rapport first. Okay. Evidence-based practices. We are in the era of evidence-based practices. Techniques alone have no therapeutic value. Techniques are only valuable if the client finds it credible and you have a good relationship. Motivational interviewing is evidence-based, has a lot of techniques. If the client doesn't trust you, it'll be less effective. EMDR has been proven to be effective if the client does not trust you. There is evidence that meditation helps adolescents deal with trauma. If they don't trust you, they may not close their eyes. They may have one eye closed and one eye watching you. Evidence-based practices introduce techniques. Techniques alone have no therapeutic value. They're only valuable if the client finds it credible and you have a good relationship. Psychotherapy is a process driven by beliefs, expectations, and suggestions. Naturally therapeutic qualities like empathy, warmth, and genuineness is what helps us to engage clients better than others. Let's pause on that one. I bring your attention to a book. And the book is called Becoming Naturally Therapeutic. Becoming Naturally Therapeutic by Jacqueline Small. And when I first read the book, Becoming Naturally Therapeutic, it made me want to burn most of my textbooks because she was saying something in that little book that I'd never seen uttered between the pages of the book. And what she said is that it's not your degree, your master's degree, your PhD that helps you engage clients. It are these naturally therapeutic qualities of empathy, warmth, and genuineness. And the research indicates, and Carl Rogers bared this out years ago, those of you who have the most empathy and the most realness will connect with clients the best. Empathy, warmth, and genuineness. Warmth is of the heart. It's an incredible story about this priest by the name of Father Eddie O'Brien. Father O'Brien was up at 3 o'clock on a Saturday night writing a Sunday morning sermon. There was a knock on the door. Father, there's a man in the hospital who's sick. He's dying. He says he wants to see a priest before he dies. He went to the hospital. The nurses said he has alcoholism. He's intoxicated now. He cursed out the whole nursing staff. Good luck. Father O'Brien walked in the man's room. What do you want? They said you wanted to see a priest. Sit down. Start telling your story. The man lost 3 wives because of his drinking. He lost 5 jobs because of his drinking. After about 4 hours, Father O'Brien asked him, is there something you'd like to tell a priest before you die? I'd love to tell you, and I know when I die, I'm going to go to hell. God will never forget me. Finally, he had to say. One day when he was 18 years old, he had a job working on the railroad, a simple job. All he had to do was when a train came through was to push a button so a gate would close, so no cars could come through while the train was coming through. One day when he was 18 years old, he was so intoxicated, he forgot to push the button. And the train came through and the car came through at the same time. And the train hit the car, killing a husband and wife and their 2 young daughters. Father O'Brien said, I've forgiven you. So no, God will. That was my father, my mother, and my 2 older sisters. The truth of the matter is that we've sent people to outer space. But one of the hardest things to master is inner space. That is forgiving others, people that have harmed us. Jacqueline Small said, the resentments that we hold in our heart block us from connecting with clients as effective as we can. Empathy and warmth. There was a group for my youth, a singing group called Earth, Wind, and Fire. And they had a song called That's the Way of the World. Here are the lyrics. A child is born with a heart of gold. The ways of the world makes his heart grow cold. Having a warm heart helps with engagement, empathy, and genuineness. Yes or no? When adults, counselors are phony, can adolescents, clients pick up on that? Can they pick up on insincerity? Quickly, right? So the University of Rhode Island had a PhD in clinical psychology, and they measured students on a scale of 1 to 5 when they entered the program to get their PhD. How naturally therapeutic were they? How empathetic were they? Warm, kind, friendly, right? When they entered the program on a 5-point scale. Those who scored 1 or 2 on the naturally therapeutic side, empathy and warmth, by the time they finished their 5 years of study, they scored on the low end. They were less therapeutic than when they started. But those who started 3 or 5 or higher, empathy, warmth, kindness, by the time they finished their 5 years of study, they were more therapeutic than who they started. Jacqueline Small in the book says that children are born naturally therapeutic. You ever see an adult who rarely smiles? And then they see a child and suddenly they realize that she can smile, he can smile. Well, my godmother was in the 4th stage of lung cancer. Her number 1 request is, where's your son? He was 3 years old. He's like, medicine. Empathy, warmth, and genuineness helps with engagement of adolescents and adults. Charisma and believability. And what is charisma? I'm glad you asked. Empathy is charisma. Warmth is charisma. Or those are the qualities. A sense of humor is charisma. Again, as Maya Angelou told Oprah Winfrey, only equals engage in small talk. Most adolescents who we work with are there because someone else said that they have to go to counseling. Maya Angelou told Oprah Winfrey that the shortest distance between 2 people is a good laugh. And in cross-cultural counseling or cross-cultural interactions, the great poet Maya Angelou told Oprah Winfrey that it's impossible to hate and laugh at the same time. If you have the ability to get adolescents to laugh, what a gift. In fact, I looked at a study. There's a presentation I do called The Therapeutic Benefits of Humor in Therapy that indicated that clients that have trauma history, when they laugh with you in counseling, they'll hold slightly more eye contact with you. Empathy is charisma. Sincerity is charisma. Energy is charisma. You know what charisma is? A deeply held belief in the capacity of clients to change and grow. Someone asked me, what's the best evidence-based practice for working with adolescents? And I told them, any practice that's in the hands of a therapist that has empathy, warmth, and genuineness, charisma, and where that therapist is trusted, they'll get better results than other therapists. And then believability, convincibility. Here's your question. What's the reason that some therapists are more convincing than others? I used to lead a group in a group home for teenage girls, and they had a little apartment living. One therapist, 80% of the girls attended, she was the one who made the referrals. Her client, she was more convincing than other therapists. That's my question. Counselor A says to adolescents, I think AA will help you. None of them go. Counselor B says, I think AA will help you. 9 out of 10 clients go. Counselor A says, I think medication might help you. No one takes it. Counselor B says, I think medication might help you. 9 out of 10 of those clients take it. That's the question. Tone of voice. Thank you, Anaji. I know Anaji. Anyone else? How come some of you are more convincing than others? I'll tell you a story while you think about it. I was leading a group with 7 teenage girls that use drugs every day. And between these 7 girls, they had a grand total of 7 days of recovery. In other words, the only recovery those girls had was that day. I heard in the program where those girls were receiving services, there was a 19-year-old emerging adult woman walking around in the same building with 3 years of recovery. They had 7 days. She had 3 years. I'm thinking what you're thinking right now. Yes, rapport, trust, partnership. We need her in this group so her recovery could rub off on them. Did you know that recovery is contagious? That sometimes all you have to do, authenticity, yes, Brian, all you have to do is put your teenager that you're working with near other teenagers in recovery, and sometimes they can catch it. I call her therapist. Can she join the group? No, she's doing fine all by herself. I called the therapist a second time. Can she join the group? No, she's doing fine all by herself. I called the third time. Can she join the group? Okay, she can join the group. Turns out she wasn't doing fine. She attended that first group and said, I was going to relapse today. Our timing was impeccable. The second group she attended said, Mark, I want to be a social worker. I want to help girls. I said, you can be a social worker. You can help girls. She came back the following week and said, after you said I could be a social worker, I cried all week. She said, I had 3 therapists before. I told them all I wanted to be a social worker. You were the only one who told me I can do it. And my friends, I told her there's only 3 things, 2 things that qualify a person, 2 things that do the work that you do. You're either an expert, meaning you studied how to do this work, or you're a witness, you live this work. She was a witness. She witnessed domestic violence at home. She was abused by an uncle. She was a witness. After I said you could become a social worker, she was at community college majoring in general studies. She declared her major social work. She received an associate's degree in social work. Then she went to university and received a bachelor's degree in social work. It was March of 2018. She called me and said, I'm in the agency lobby. Come to the lobby. I have a surprise for you. When I made it to the lobby, she was wearing a sweatshirt from one of the most prestigious universities in the world. And she showed me a letter where that university honored her and $50,000 in scholarship money towards her master's degree in social work. June 15, 2019, I attended her graduation ceremony and watched her walk across the stage where she received her master's degree in social work. And then she says, Mark, how did you know I could do it? And why did I believe you? Nobody in my family graduated high school. How'd you know? Why did I believe you? Let me tell you how I knew she could do it. Like many of you in this webinar, Research says that helping professionals, that you and I have more trauma in childhood than any other profession. I witnessed domestic violence. My dad died smoking crack cocaine. My stepfather used to abuse my mother physically in front of us, right? 20 years ago, my first son died. My dad died smoking crack cocaine. The reason I knew that she could get that MSW, if I could survive all of that, of course you could do that. I believe she believed me because of the conviction in my voice. The reason I knew is because what you and I have overcome in our lifetime. Empathy doesn't help. In other words, I'm suggesting that our own experience, our own trauma that we've endured becomes our superpower that makes us believable, even if we never disclose what we've gone through. All right, cross-cultural engagement. Do you know that if you're 50 and you're working with a teenager from your same cultural group, that you're doing cross-cultural counseling because you might have different values? There's a story of this Puerto Rican boxer from Humboldt Park. And Humboldt Park is a Puerto Rican neighborhood on the northwest side of Chicago. And he was a great boxer. He never lost a fight. In fact, I heard about his story on ESPN. He was going to be the next great fighter. And then the short film took a bad turn for the worse, then it got better. This promising fighter was killed by an intoxicated motorist. The good news is that he was an organ donor. And the short film was about his mother meeting the people that received their son's organs. A man walked into the room that got one of her son's kidneys. The mother politely smiled at the man and shook his hand. A woman walked in the room that got her son's other kidney. The mother politely smiled and shook her hand. A man walked in that room that received their son's lungs. The mother politely smiled at the man and shook his hand. And then the woman walked in the room that got her son's heart. And when the mother saw the woman who got her son's heart, she lost it with tears in her eyes. She ran up to the woman and asked, "Can I give you a hug? Could I put my head against your chest?" Because she wanted to hear her son's heartbeat one more time. Therapy is not head stuff. It's heart stuff. The essence of where we connect is in the heart. And just as you know, cross-cultural tension can exist outside of the counseling relationship, it can show up in the relationship. And there's no defense against a loving, caring heart. You ever notice when you say the wrong thing that insults someone, the first question they ask is, "Where's your heart?" And they sense that your heart is coming from a caring place. It's amazing what can be forgiven. We connect with the heart. So in cross-cultural counseling, we recommend or believe that transparency and predictability is important. The easier it is to read you and the more predictable, the easier it is to connect cross-culturally. Clients are the expert on their culture. You know about EMDR and DBT. The client is the expert on their culture. Humility is more realistic than cultural competence. Cultural competence makes an assumption that once you gain a certain amount of knowledge, you become culturally competent. I happen to believe that it's impossibility to be culturally competent. In other words, I believe that you can read 300 books on Chinese culture, and there would be some things about Chinese culture that you simply wouldn't understand. The federal government recognizes 574 Native American, federally recognized Native American tribes, 574. How long would it take you to know all there is to know about all 574 of those tribes? Did you put your response in chat? How long would it take? Yes or not, I know Tonir Kane. How long would it take to know all there is to know about all 574 of those tribes? Yeah, Tamara says forever, several lifetimes. Benjamin says you'd have to die and come back, and then you still would know it all. And I've talked to Native Americans recently. They told me there's about another 436 tribes, about 1,000. It would take forever. But cultural humility, I'm singing to the choir now, says that I don't know everything there is to know about your culture or mine, but I'm humble enough to continue to learn more. Microaggressions, unintentional slights. Mark, you're going to like our lunch today in our treatment facility. We're having fried chicken. Now I feel insulted. I happen to love fried chicken, but the fact that you assumed that I did, I feel insulted. Kenneth Hardy told Irvin Yalom's grandson that communicating with a client, that only a small percentage of that communication is the words that come out of our mouth. The rest is body language and facial expression. We pay attention to how clients are receiving our words. If I say something that insults you and I'm trying to explain myself, then what I'm building is a wall instead of a bridge. I really need to listen to how you're being impacted by my words. You look really uncomfortable when I made that statement. Can you tell me about it? Intersectionality, how the life of the therapist and the adolescent are the same and yet different. How they're the same and how they're different. I have a colleague that grew up on a farm, a white male in his 40s, who works with African American, Latino, Hispanic males on probation, teenagers. And here's what he says. I imagine you all are wondering how I, as a white male who grew up on a farm, can understand what's happening in your life as a Hispanic male growing up in the city of Chicago. You're right, I can't understand. I'm going to learn a lot from you. If I say something that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, bring it to my attention because I want to make a connection. Since our life is similar and yet different. I might say to a young African American male, yes, we're both African American men, but I have no idea what it's like to feel like you got to smoke marijuana every day because you hear gunshots on your way to school. I'm going to learn a lot from your experiences. We're similar in this way, but yet our experiences are different in these ways. Then, of course, the integration of evidence-based practices with cultural responsiveness. I'm going to give you an example before our time is up. Okay, so we're talking the first two sessions, matching the length of the session with the needs of the adolescent. Here's your question. Let us chat. Why are counseling sessions an hour? Why are counseling sessions an hour? Let me answer my own question. Because they've always been an hour. Even before insurance, Kelly, it's always been an hour. Sigmund Freud saw clients for an hour, so we see clients for an hour. And then one day, after 35 years of being a therapist, I said, Mark, think for yourself. My professors told me every session should be an hour. My field instructors told me every session should be an hour. But have you ever worked with a client, an adolescent, where an hour felt like torture? So what I started doing was negotiating for how long the sessions would last. And what I found is most teenage girls were okay with an hour, but most of the adolescent males, 30 minutes was max. So I meet with lots of the girls from 45 minutes to an hour, teenage males half an hour, because what I started learning is that once you reach the peak where they can't do any more talk therapy, then they feel tortured. And I found that we engage them better when the length matched what they could handle in terms of the amount of time in therapy. I met with one young man, 25 minutes, once a month for 5 years. It changed the world. I like to meet with couples, married couples, adults, for 90 minutes. You know why? Because they like to blame each other for about an hour. Now they're tired. I got 30 minutes to help them change. Match the frequency with the needs of the adolescent. Let us chat. Why are counseling sessions every week? Why are counseling sessions every week? You all sitting down? Because they've always been every week. Then about after 35 years of like having every third or fourth teenager say, this is boring, right? Looking at their watch before we even started, then we started negotiating a frequency of meeting. How frequently would you like to meet? Every other week. And then we would negotiate they were on probation. If you would do this in a week that you didn't meet with me, watch a video on how marijuana affects the brain, the body, and behavior, and we talk about it. Watch this video about this professional basketball player who drugged his way out of the league, and then we talk about it. Go to an open 12-step group meeting. If you do this the week you didn't meet with me, let's negotiate. I'll see you every other week. An interesting thing started to happen. This is important. With some of the adolescents, when we met every week, they would say this was boring because nothing changed. But when we started meeting every other week, Suddenly it was no longer boring because nothing may not change in 7 days, but everything changes in 14 days. The frequency of the session, right? The length of the session, I found makes all the difference in the world in terms of engagement, inclusive language. How are we going to help you successfully get off of probation? How are we going to get that parole officer off your back? Roll with resistance, avoid power struggles. Can you win when you have a power struggle with an adolescent? Yes or no? Can you win? Can you really win? Yes or no? I agree with you, Vicky. They might become compliant, but you don't really win. Okay. How to know when you're in rapport? More relaxed body language. Their breathing becomes more relaxed. I've worked with teenagers that were so anxious about going to counseling, they had to go get high before they went to counseling. You're in rapport when the breathing becomes more relaxed, when the laughter is unforced. You know you're in rapport with an adolescent when they volunteer information that you did not ask them about. You know you're in rapport when they start giving people in their life real names. At first, the client was saying, my girlfriend, my boyfriend, my brother. Then he says, my best friend Mike, my girlfriend Sheila, my brother Jason. When they give people real names, you know you're in rapport. When the client starts making slightly more eye contact with you. And when they trust you so much that they're willing to correct your understanding of what they just said to you. No, Mark, that's not what I meant. This is what we meant. I decided 38 years in as a therapist, I have no right to ask you anything deeply personal unless I know that we're in rapport first. I join as long as I need to. Research by Scott Miller and Barry Duncan indicates that adolescents and adults make most of their progress within the first 6 sessions of therapy. Some of you are thinking, wait a minute, I worked with teenagers for 5 years. It basically means you're the Sigmund Freud of this thing. You're the Alfred Adler of counseling. It basically means, according to research, that you convinced them within the first 6 sessions that you were really good at your job, and now they're not in a hurry to change. So they stay with you long. So I started adolescents that didn't want to be there, that were not court mandated. Would you be willing to meet with me for 3 sessions? I asked this question over a 10-year period. What percentage of the adolescents I work with do you think said yes to the question, I'll see you 3 sessions? What percentage said yes? 100% said yes. And over a 10-year period, all of them did it except for about 6. You know why? First off, the reason I came up with this intervention based on research, I'm trying to get you past 2 sessions. Because if I can get you past 2 and get into 3, we might go into rapport. Because they realize that 3 sessions is not a life sentence. They can do 3 sessions. And because they said yes, then it's autonomy there. And now they're no longer talking in one-word paragraphs. We're communicating. Minimize confrontation. That's why approaches like motivation interviewing have been found to be helpful. Have an effective opening statement. It took me a long time to get this statement. I'm proud of it. I know I can't make you stop getting high. I will honor whatever decision you make concerning your drug use. First, she doesn't believe you. And then when she believes you, she says to herself, she's different than my father, my mother, probation. They're trying to make me stop. I can be honest with her. He's not trying to make me stop. I know I can't make you take medication. I'll honor whatever decision you take. It's your life. Avoid premature labels. You're a schizophrenic. We don't have a relationship. You're an alcoholic. We don't have a relationship. Discover uniqueness and strength. Here we go. There was a program that asked me to help them engage these adolescent girls who were pregnant more effectively. They were having a hard time engaging the adolescent girls in treatment. Who these girls were pregnant. These girls, they would say to their counselors, you can have a baby, I can have a baby. What can you tell me? What can you tell me? You can have a baby, I can have a baby. It says, Alyssa, my computer is about to restart. What do I do? Because I do not need my computer to restart.
If you can say it to wait, let's see
I
if
see
it's
a snooze button.
yeah, let's snooze it.
I don't know, but you all know that if it does, I'm going coming right back. Hold on in there with us. Okay. Yeah, didn't let me snooze. Okay. Maybe if I could. All right. So I said the problem is that it's your intake. You're asking these girls questions like, what's your grade point average? All of these girls have dropped out of school, right? You're asking these girls questions like, do you get along with your parents? No, that's why they're there, right? You asking these girls if they ever had a venereal disease. You're embarrassing the girls. Ask them these questions. If you had three wishes, what would they be? When are you happiest? What are you doing on a Saturday afternoon? Who are your heroes? What's your favorite food? Um, what kind of things are funny to you? Do you like to hear jokes or do you like to tell jokes? And they said, you know what? When we ask these girls these questions, we connect with them better. And I tell them it's because these questions about who are you as a human being, it made them connect better as opposed to like, tell me about all the drugs you use. So once I was given a seminar with HIV service providers, and I paired people up in twos, and they asked each other these questions. And one man looked at the questions. He got up and he stormed out of the room. I'm thinking to myself, he must think these questions are stupid. He came back in the training room and he said, I went in the bathroom to cry. And then he shared his story. He was 28 years old. He was born HIV positive. His T cells hadn't changed since birth. So the medical community considered him to be a walking miracle. He says, I went in the bathroom to cry because I realized in 28 years, and all these years I've been doing this work, no one ever asked me, what's your favorite food? And what do you like to do on a Saturday afternoon? He said, they see me as a subject, not a human being. Do you know that so much of intake leaves people feeling deficit and less than? I imagine all of you have done intake. We ask clients questions like, tell me about your drug use. Tell me about the times you've been arrested. Have you ever been treated for mental illness? Have you ever tried suicide, right? How many times have you been hospitalized for mental illness? What's your grade point average? Sometimes we leave clients feeling like failures at intake. I started wondering, what would happen when working with adolescents, along with focusing on their uniqueness when the first time we meet with them, we check in on strengths. Like, what do you do well? And how have you been able to endure so much? That second question is the trauma question. Most of the adolescents we work with have issues of trauma. How'd you endure that? My father died smoking crack cocaine May 29, 1986. My grandfather died a month later of a broken heart. They called it a heart attack. His only child, my father, died. My grandmother responded to the death of her immediate family, her husband of 50 years, my father, her only son, by having a stroke. She never walked again. When my grandmother had that stroke, she was bedridden. The whole neighborhood suffered. My grandmother fed the whole neighborhood. She was depressed, stayed in bed, didn't eat much, lost weight. A decade later, my grandmother died. And the plan was for me and my siblings to plan her funeral. How are we going to do that? Because when my grandmother was alive, she did all the planning. My brother wandered through the house and found her Bible and said, turn to the section called the 23rd Psalm. You'll know exactly how to plan her funeral. The 23rd Psalm was a section of the Bible my grandmother recited when she felt stressed. We turned to the 23rd Psalm. Pieces of paper fell out of the Bible. We picked them up, put them in order, and we read the notes on each page, written by my grandmother. Difficult to read. She wrote each note lying upside down on her bed on her back. One note read, at my funeral, I want to wear my hair the way I wore in the 1940s. We did the best we could. Another note read, at my funeral, I want to wear a white dress and a red rose. We got my grandmother a white dress and a red rose. One note read, at my funeral, I want Sister Sarah to sing Amazing Grace. That song has never been sung more beautiful. Another note written by my grandmother read, would you ask Reverend Emmett to preach my eulogy? Ask Deacon Jones to say a few words. I know he's shy. Ask him anyway. Last note. I'd like for all five of my grandkids to speak at my funeral. And following the funeral, there was the burial, and I'm in the limousine and it hit me. And even though my grandmother looked so frail and helpless the last decade of her life, she was powerful beyond measure. She was so powerful, she was able to plan her own funeral. Gerda said, nobody rides to low expectations. See a person for who they are, they only become worse. But see them for who they could be, they become who they should be. How have you been able to endure so much? What do you like to do in your leisure time? What's the best thing you ever made happen? I worked with a lifeguard that was mandated to meet with me because they found marijuana in his system, his body. They took a drug test. He was so bitter until I asked him, "What's the best thing you ever made happen?" He said one day after he was fired, he was trying to buy drugs and he saw a woman laying on the sidewalk that couldn't breathe. He performed CPR. I said, "You're more than a lifeguard. You're a lifesaver." He looked me in the eye. We were in rapport. The best 3 moments you can recall in your life. Students have asked me, if I could ask clients one question, what would it be? And it wouldn't be what brought you here, which is how'd you mess up your life? It'd be this next question. What is your previous life suffering preparing you to do with the rest of your life? That's a purpose question based in strength. What have you learned from what you've gone through? It means for the adolescent, whatever they've gone through was not for naught. And what sources of strength did you draw from when you face those special challenges? And which of your experiences has taught you the most about your own resilience? Here's the story as I wind down. I have a friend named Greg Risberg. And Greg Risberg started off as a fourth grade teacher. The backdrop of where he taught fourth grade was Robert Taylor Public Housing. Then he became a social worker and then a motivational speaker. And Greg told me that one day a man called him at midnight and woke him up and asked, "Are you the same Greg Risberg who taught fourth grade across the street from public housing 30 years ago?" Greg said, "Yeah, that's me." He said, "I'm a student in your fourth grade class. You were my teacher. I'm a decorated military man. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if I wouldn't mind up achieving the rank of a Colin Powell. I was just calling you to tell you you really made a difference in my life." And Greg said, "What did I do?" He says, "Every Friday you would stop teaching and you would sit the entire fourth grade class in a circle. You'd have us to read the newspaper from cover to cover. And in reading the newspaper from cover to cover, what I learned, there was more happening in the world than simply what was happening in public housing. It made me curious about the world. So here we graduated high school, and I joined the military at the high school. I went around the world twice," he said. "But you did something that was more special than that. One day you invited the entire fourth grade class on a special field trip. You invited the entire class to your house. And you asked the entire class to bring a bag lunch to your house. And I looked at my refrigerator that night and I saw that I had no food. And when I made it to your house with no food, you went in your refrigerator and you fixed me a sandwich." Is anyway, the reason I'm calling is because we still have a home in Chicago and I'll be coming home next month. And I wanted to invite you over to my house so I could fix you a sandwich. And it dawned on me, it took him 30 years to see the fruits of his labor. Your work with adolescents is like that. You're like a farmer who plants seeds, who may not see the fruits of your labor in the season that you plant the seed. And sometimes it takes many seasons to see the fruits of your labor. So as we wind down, and Alyssa's going to put a link in chat for you to evaluate our time together, I release my favorite emoji to you for all that you do. Because as I mentioned, every day you wake up, somebody's life condition is improved. So thank you so very much for allowing me to spend this time with you. And that's what I have. If you put in chat just a moment, what's the one action you're going to take when this webinar is over as a result of our time together? And thank you so much until we see each other again, from my heart to yours.
Thank you everyone so much for joining us today, and thank you, Mark, for your wonderful
Thank you, Anosha.
presentation. I did put some reminders in the chat for you all, so please make sure you take a couple minutes to fill out that post-event survey. Your feedback does go back to our funder, and it does allow us to keep providing free trainings to you all, so your feedback is very, very important to us. Certificates of attendance will be sent out via email to all who attended today's session in full, and the recording and slides will be on the Great Lakes ATTC website by the end of the week. So if you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to us. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing you. I believe our next session is March 31st for this series, so make sure you register for that next session. And we hope to see you all on future trainings. Thank you all.
Thank you, Alyssa.